Why, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Innovantage Podcast, where business meets tech to bring you your competitive edge. As always, I'm your host, Max, and it is my ongoing job and duty to explore that edge between business and tech and to find something interesting for you to hear me ask people questions about. And today's edge is going to be around data as it relates to AI, as it relates to regulation, as it relates to literacy, as it relates to real practical use cases that have been spanning over 30 years of one particular person's career. And that person is one Dennis van Bregt, who is the head of data analytics and AI at allnex. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and really nice being here. So yeah, I'm Dennis van Bregt. So thanks for pronouncing it properly.
I tried.
I am indeed the head of data analytics and AI at allnex, where data is really master data management, customers, suppliers, materials, data pipelines. So getting the data from our main applications to be available, and then the next thing, part of data, which is the data platform. So really building up a data platform to have data available in first instance for analytics, for reporting, but also for AI and machine learning. And last but not least, part of the data is also data governance by design, which is data privacy, which is data quality, which is data security, and also data literacy. The analytics part of my job is what do we do with the data? So that is traditionally linked to SAP with business objects, but more and more transferring to Power BI based on our data platform. Last but not least, the AI part. So where can artificial intelligence and machine learning already help making processes at allnex more effective and or efficient? Effective means they have a higher impact, and efficient means they have higher productivity.
Okay. So sounds like a very robust system, very very particular, very well designed, I guess. Very kind of I wouldn't I want to use the word artificial, but I don't know when to use the word artificial. That's not the correct word, I think, to describe the environment itself.
Uh,
But outside of the cameras, you've told me the beginning of your career has spanned like 30 years again. And 30 years ago, it was not as efficient and as structured. That's the better word I'm looking for, structured.
yeah.
So it was definitely not as structured. People were not approaching data in a way that they approach data today. And even today, there is, well, a lot of companies, organizations, and general kind of market behavior that is not as structured as you describe it. So can you maybe walk me through a little bit how you arrived to this point in your career?
Yeah, sure. So I studied econometrics, which nowadays would be called data science. I did that back in the 90s, so that's where the 30 years of experience comes from. And at that time, I spent 80% of my time on data. So getting the data, making the data ready, cleaning the data, collecting more data, aggregating data, etc. 10% of my time I spent on programming languages like C++ to really develop the models that you need to come to the outcomes. And then 10% run those models and then present the results back. If I now fast forward 30 years from then, the basis is still the same. So I still spend 80% of my time on data. And the reason for that is a lot of fundamental issues with data are still there. Plus, the amount of data that we have at the disposal now compared with 30 years ago has been exponentially grown. So, even though we have more tools and we have more techniques and we have more experience on how to get the data ready, just by the sheer amount of volume of that data, with then the data privacy regulations coming in, the data security concerns that you need to take care of. So, still today, I spend 80% of data. So, that's why my department is by design to have the data part, the analytics part, so that we really collect the data, that we really have the data available, that we analyze the data, that we really understand what the data is telling us, what's in it and what's not. So that for the AI and the machine learning part, we have a very good input to either the third party services we use for AI or with our own data scientists, that we can give them a fundamental understanding of that data so that they can really do with it what they need.
Okay, I like Personally, I talk a lot about the importance of data in AI as well. I'm not like a data specialist myself, but due to the nature of our business, we do a lot of work that is connected to data, and we have been doing a lot of work that has been connected to data for a long time. So, like all the things that you mentioned, basically data science, data engineering, data platforms, data lakehouses, warehouses. So, anything connected to data is something that we've been working on for a long time now. And I always try to underline and highlight the importance of data, especially right now when a lot of organizations are running towards implementing AI solutions as much as possible, as fast as possible. Some would say just driven by the hype of it. So, can you tell me maybe how that understanding of the importance of data has evolved over your career? Has it always been the same, or are there any eras that you can pinpoint?
Yeah. The last 3 to 5 years became much more interesting because with the coming of large language models, then also the unstructured data became much more something that we could use. So in the first 20, 25 years, even if you had to deal with unstructured data, you had to structure it first. So extract data from PDFs, from transcripts, and then really try to get them into literally tables so that analytics models could actually work with those tables because it needed the structure. It needs to know where it's looking at, in which column, in which row, etc., etc. In the last 5 years, you saw that more and more with the coming of the large language models, especially OpenAI has helped a lot with launching ChatGPT to the wider world. Unstructured data all of a sudden became directly available because what can a large language model do? It can get the data out of the context that is actually in that unstructured data. So, like our company, like many other companies, we are facing a aging challenge, which means that between now and 10 years, a considerable part of our workforce will retire. Those are usually people which are with us already for 20, 30, 40, 40 plus years. They accumulated a lot of knowledge. And of course, I suggested, hey, why not get the neural implant from Elon Musk? Just plant them in and extract all the information. That didn't go down that well yet. So we had to find another way. And then really working with unstructured data, going from, hey, do you got working instructions? Do you have some good presentations? Do you have documents you use in your handover? Can we use transcripts of your Teams meetings when you talk to people, where you explain certain concepts? And there you see that AI has been such an enormous help because in the past we had to transcribe it ourselves, summarize it ourselves, and then see if we can get it into a tabular format to then use later on, or to really make it structured that you literally build up the decision tree yourself. Now it can do it a lot automatically. And as you said, I'm already in this space for 30 years. I did it in various disciplines. I started my career in finance as a business analyst, really looking at the story behind the numbers and really reporting the numbers. In that, also had to do a lot of the corrections in SAP because 95% of all the things that happened in the factory follow the red line. 5% deviated from that, becomes reworked, becomes lost. Even sometimes was a little bit more because somebody didn't count well enough. I had to correct all of that. That gave a very good basis for SAP. So I also did then an SAP implementation. From the SAP implementation, rolled more into logistics and supply chain because that's also based on a lot of data. Think of where do you assign things, who's the ownership, how do you guide the workflows, but more important, what are the different lead times? Are there variabilities in lead times? How can you then cater for that in your factory planning, into your customer service, all those type of things. So did more ERP implementations, went more into supply chain operations, combined those until I came to a stage where somebody asked me from, hey, we know that we really have a fundamental issue in our data because when we run a report of our top 10 customers, it's not the top 10. It's the top 10 individual accounts buying most from us in the last year or the last period. But we have really big conglomerates of customers, which consists of a lot of different legal entities or has sold tools, as they called in SAP. We need to build hierarchies. And for hierarchies, we need to have governance so that we know how we build them up. So then I really went more into the master data management itself. Again, also supported SAP rollouts, but then more from a data migration point of view and a data cleansing and readiness. Then I went more into the generic ERP, where I also did more in the maintenance and repair organization of the ERP setting. Of course, finance, financial consolidation. Then I thought okay, now it might be time to also move more towards the customer facing side, because ERP is process talking to processes, systems talking to systems. Master data is really the pure ingredients for those processes and the systems. So I then headed up content management. So really translating all those data into rich text, into different languages with images and videos and hotspots and even AR experience, those type of things. So that was really nice. Then I also started more in digital analytics because I got the question from, hey, we know what it costs in an investment to do what you need to do with your team. But what is actually the result of that? So did more in digital analytics. So there the econometrics background came back again from, okay, how do we then analyze what the impact is? Then I ended up with a company where I could combine both. So do master data management and content management. So really a lot with translations, introducing machine translations with still human in the loop, auto-generated content, you name it. And then I went more into the full digital analytics. So my previous company was at Miele, at direct to consumer digital channels. And there I headed up data governance and analytics. So quite comparable to what I do now at allnex, except that at allnex, really the master data management is part of it. Well, at Miele, that wasn't. But there, I think my career came full circle because I studied econometrics. I did a lot with data science, a lot with modeling, a lot with statistics, a lot with heuristics. So just blunt force computing power. So what changed more in the last 10, 15 years? Two more things. So one, computer power is now much more at your availability because with the hyperscalers, you can now get a cloud subscription and you can really scale up and down depending on your need. Well, 30 years ago, I was working on a desktop computer on the university, getting the blue screen of death of Windows once in a while, losing all your job and have to start all over. Well, now you can spin it up and you can really get results in seconds or minutes. Or if you want to be more cost effective and you don't need the result right away, you can also use it in a bit more of the load times, and then you get the answer within a couple of hours or the next day. So that is really, really a big revolution, which really helped people in my profession. Also there, you got the SaaS solutions, software as a service. So for data availability, data cleansing, APIs, etc., became much easier to get access to various data, not only internally, but also externally. So you can use more external sources. So could you correlate weather patterns with visits to a Miele experience store compared with customers buying online? All those type of things could then really be made happening. The second big revolution is when I grew up, knowledge was power and software was money. So if you want to have a good tool, you had to get an expensive tool, you had to get expensive licenses, you had to install it, you had to train people. Now with everything being more open source, more available, more communities, more sharing, I really love using systems like GitHub and GitLab and Hugging Face, because in the past you either get the tool who invented the wheel, or you had to reinvent the wheel yourself and set it all up yourself and programming it. So as I said, when I studied, 80% was data, 10% was programming, 10% was running the model and presenting. 30 years later, that 80% did not change. Due to the sheer amount of data, the privacy concerns, the security things you need to do, people really think that data is black and white. It's either there or it's not. And if it's there, it's 100% quality. That's not the case. That's why we also do data literacy, which I'll come back to later. But now that 10% in developing the model, I don't need to do. Somebody already invented the model. I can import it into our AI foundry and things like that and already use the models. So now I can use 20% of the time to really do the actual running of the model and seeing what comes out of it, fine-tuning it and presenting it back. So I always say, hey, I now have twice as much time to really do the outcome and the value add, but there's still only 20%. And people don't understand that because they now think that with AI, that it's a magic wand. You wave it 3 times and all the magic happens. And I am a fan of Harry Potter, but not in my work. So I love watching it, etc., and I like the theme. But in my work, it's just a lot of hard work. It's data, data, data. And that's why we also came up with a data literacy program. Our data literacy program is getting started. So it's not yet completely live. But what we really aim to do is we want to explain to people, specifically for their role, what is the influence of data and eventually also of AI. So really be open and transparent from, hey, if you're an operator, then this is the data that will be at your disposal, making your work easier, giving you more insights, making you manage more by exception than really having to check everything yourself. And AI will probably then become more and more of a kind of a virtual assistant, also picking up patterns which you might not see, or where the amount of data is just too massive for you to put on one screen and analyze it. So AI will start helping you as well. And we are actually already conducting a pilot for that. But we also reverse it. We also then tell people what their particular function has influence on data and AI, because every one of us are creating data on a second by second, minute by minute basis. This recording, for example, you can transcribe it. The transcript can then also be seen as data, which you can mine, which you can take snippets out of. Maybe you use AI already to create shorts that you go, hey, what was the most relevant element of this conversation? And can we make a short of that of maximum 30, 60 seconds? So we generate data. So we need to be clear in our articulation. If we use all kinds of company proprietary abbreviations, make sure that at least you explain them once during the meeting. Make sure that people don't talk to each other, that people really are logged in with a clear name that you can find out from, hey, I want to generate action. So this person said that he will take the action. So that gets recorded. So that's why data literacy for us is a two-way street. So one, we give them information, what's in it for them, but we also really give them the guidelines and even the guardrails, what they need to do. So that there's also something in it for the rest of the company, because it's not always the person generating the data who's actually going to use it later on. That's also why I still spend 80% time in data, because even though we got common systems roll out worldwide, we produce coatings and resins. So we literally create polymers which can be used as an industrial coating. One of the most familiar products is car paint. So our polymers make sure that the manufacturers can apply the car paint, that it nicely flows, that it hardens under a certain temperature and then doesn't soften anymore, that it has a certain glossiness, that it has a certain scratch resistance and a certain UV protection. So why don't you know allnex then from car paint? Because you know the AkzoNobels of this world. That is because we are purely B2B. So we deliver to the AkzoNobels. They add some solvents and pigments and they sell it as car paint. If you open your phone, there's a little membrane between your electronics that they don't short circuit. Also, that is done by our polymers. So our production process is a lot like cooking. So we don't just blend materials. We really do a whole cooking process around them by stirring, heating them up, cooling them down, adding all kinds of catalysts, etc. So it really is a very big process, which we do in what is called reactors. We do that in 33 factories worldwide, supported by 22 R&D centers. So even though they're all using common systems, which from a global perspective we have access to, it's not always used consistently. People either find workarounds, people have a slightly different interpretation what a field might mean. So we see that if we do a first use case for a particular site and we really understand that data, it goes relatively well. If we then want to scale it up, we sometimes really face challenges because the data is not consistent across different factories. So it's the same system, it's the same tables, but it could be that there's a slightly different interpretation. So that again results in us putting a lot of effort in data, but also us putting a lot of effort into explaining why data is so important, not only to us, but for the whole organization, and make it more future-proof. So the knowledge management I said before also really helped because people are also a little bit hesitant and a bit scared because is AI coming after my job? Because I read all those articles and there are already companies letting people go because AI is taking it over. And what about me? With us, part of it is not going to materialize because AI is not coming after everyone's job, because in a lot of cases you still need the human in the loop. So we really want to have people focusing more on the added value. Do you need as many people for the added value as before? That could be debated based on the process, based on if you now have a lot of work that doesn't get done because you just don't have the time for it, then you free the time up and you can do that. So productivity goes up altogether. But with us, with also having so many people retiring, which we probably won't be able to replace in terms of quality and quantity, then having AI helping us with that is already a big win. And also, if you look at the younger generations, they learn differently. There are studies that they're wired differently because they grew up already with a smartphone and with tablets, and they know there are systems around them that can already help them, that they don't need to read a manual, but they can watch a YouTube instruction, etc., etc. So what also helps by mining all that unstructured data is that we can also more dynamically turn that into training material. So in the past, it was, hey, this person is going to retire in 2 years. Let's find his or her replacement. Let's put that replacement next to him or her for at least 18 months so that they can learn everything and the ropes. And then by the time that person retires, the other one can take over. Imagine any 20-year-old around you that you go, hey, you can sit next to me for the next 18 months. You don't have to do anything except learning, and then you can take over for me. That person won't really be very enthusiastic because they go, if I need to spend so much time in learning it, is it then really the job for me? Because I already know a lot. I did my university and I can work with the modern tools. So next year, we're actually going to experiment with augmented reality and virtual reality to see if we can turn all that unstructured data we're currently still mining and trying to structure to a certain extent, if we can turn them into interactive training and how-tos and remote support type of setups, so that people can really also learn more at their pace with more modern tools at their disposal, so that we really cater for being future-proof. Is it easy? No, because again, it's not a magic wand which you wave 3 times and all the magic happens. So I get a lot of pushback as well because people go, but at home I use ChatGPT and I asked it. I have an 8-year-old son. I got a 10-year-old daughter. My son really likes sporting activities outside. My daughter is already getting more into the cultural things. My wife also likes to be more active, but more in the nature that she can walk around. And with me, I already have a tough job. I just want to sit back, relax, have a nice cold beer, and read a book. And they asked ChatGPT, I want to go to Italy. What is the best time to go? What do you recommend, etc.? And it came with a complete holiday itinerary and which places to go. If it's a day of bad weather, then you can still do some indoor activity. So great. And I go, yeah, but just look at the data, because there's so many Google reviews, Yelp reviews, Booking.com reviews, Trivago reviews, etc., which have both positive and negative experience. So that's great from holidays. People like to share their experience. So there's a lot there. So it can easily figure out what are comparable family setups, which really had a good time, which really had a bad time, what caused to have a good time, what caused to have a bad time. And that's why it can combine all of that and really give you that. But that same person asked me, okay, can it then develop our company strategy? And I go, well, it can assist in that if you really point out in which areas you wanted to do some deep research or to do some competitive analysis. I said, but to write the whole strategy, let's again look at the data. We have about 2 or 3 real global competitors. They don't have their strategy online because it's their competitive advantage. We don't have our strategy online because it's our competitive advantage.
Sure.
So where does the AI then really need to learn from our specific industry? What might be growth markets? What might be defend markets? What might be markets we didn't explore yet? You really need to guide it. And if you then feed it a little bit more internal information, let us do some more in-depth research, then it can help you with parts of your strategy. But you still need to tie it together. You still really need to guide it, because just asking, give me a 5-year strategy for a company. It will come with a strategy, but you could put our logo on it. You could put any other logo on it, because it will probably be so generic that it applies to everyone, but it's not giving you that competitive edge. So again, there, data. Also there, you need to invest. And yes, also, some people come to me and go, "Hey, but if I want to do more with AI, what do you recommend me to do? Do I need to learn Python? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that?" And then I go, "It depends what you want to get out. If you really want to do more analytics and more really data mining, etc., process mining, then yes, Python, R might really be good parts of your toolbox, even though more and more can already be written by AI. But getting at least the basics of those languages does give you an understanding how it ties together. But if you want to be more into marketing or content generation or images or videos, spend more time in really understanding prompt engineering, because by your prompts, you can get much better results, because you then understand what you are triggering, what you want. And the fun part is, I was at a marketing conference last year, and there they said from, yeah, marketeers really worry about their jobs, because you already had during the Super Bowl a completely AI generated ad and all those
Yeah.
type of things. It can do translations, it can do content generation, it can do images. It's getting better and better in doing videos. But marketeers are very good in getting the message across. So what message do you want to give your audience? So giving marketeers a crash course in prompt engineering, a lot of them were really, really good prompt engineers, because they knew how to ask questions to get to the results, while you had other people just go, "Give me my 5-year strategy." Yeah, if you do it like that, then not much come out of that. But if you then really go from, okay, I'm a middle-aged customer and I want to do this and this, so they already created the persona, they created the context, they created the market development, and then they go, "Hey, how can I better teach you?"
So let's try and unpack that. There's a lot of good stuff that you have said, and there's a lot of good stuff that I want to explore a little bit more in depth. But first and foremost, I think it's all kind of tied together around the concept of literacy. And I believe that's a very important context as well, because I've had, for example, government officials on the show, and they also look at data literacy as an important thing to develop amongst their constituents. So just focusing on the data literacy of the overall population. What kind of data do you share, and to whom, and when, and where, and why? And I believe that there's a lot of regulation here in the EU that already supports that. So, it's not as easy for a lot of corporations to gather data, explore that data, exploit that data, right? But it all comes down to the individual at the end of the day. You need to understand what it is that you're sharing and with whom, and what kind of data can you leverage yourself, and what kind of data you can trust and which ones you cannot. So in your example, yeah, ChatGPT can plan an itinerary for a vacation. ChatGPT can give you a strategy, but you need to understand the limitations of LLMs, what they are and what they are not. They are not like an analytical tool, for example. They cannot give you the best outcome based on large modicums of data. It can just generate something that looks real via text. And if you want real analysis, you need real analytical tools. You need to go to booking.com, for example, and see what kind of options there are for places to stay. And yeah, maybe in the future, ChatGPT will be able to do it, but not right now. So in your examples, when you spoke about data literacy, what do you mean specifically? Is it about educating just the employees? Is it about working on your own personal understanding of what data is and isn't, or is it something else?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack now what you said. So, yeah, there's a lot of regulation in the EU. And as a consumer and as a private person, I really value the regulations like GDPR, which is really protecting my personal identifiable information.
Yeah.
As a professional, that usually results in kind of restrictions and having to go through hoops, making sure that you include the data privacy officer and legal, etc. But if you collect the consent in a right way and you deal with the data in a responsible way, where you did get the consent for, then still a lot is possible. And in a lot of cases, if you use aggregated data, you can still get quite a lot of the intelligence without having to really pinpoint an individual. So our data literacy, yes, it does contain GDPR. So what is personal identifiable information, and where can it be used in a corporate sense? And we also give people the tips to consider what they learn in a corporate sense to also translate that into their private life, because people are sharing a lot via social media, via all kinds of groups, etc. And that awareness is not always there. Um, is it our task to create that awareness? From a company perspective, yes, but also from an employer perspective, we really do want to give them those tips and tricks. More recently, the EU AI Act came into place, which already has a couple of things in enforcement where you really need to make sure that you know where and which AI you're using. And then do a self-assessment, either as a developer if you build it up in-house, or as a deployer if you use third-party tools. Uh, Most of them that we are using are in the low risk category. But the reason why the developer and the deployer both need to do their own risk assessment is one, to really make sure that both of them did it right. But also as a deployer, you deploy it to use cases which a developer might not have in mind, which means that some of your use cases might be in a higher risk classification than what the developer actually intended for the use cases they developed that particular tool. Um, so there's a lot going on there. There's still a lot unknown about it. So there are a lot of different forums, and every conference or roundtable I attend, data governance, especially the literacy part, the EUAI Act, all comes up, because what does literacy really means is you educate people to be able to know what is happening around them and what they are using. Um, but from a user perspective, do I need to explain every one of you the inner workings of Excel? No, but probably everyone is using Excel on a daily basis. And when somebody shows you a pivot table, then you go, oh, that is possible. And then you find out how you can use that. So there you don't have to put in the effort in really explaining the actual inner workings. But you can give dedicated trainings and Excel literacy that you know how to work with Excel. Same goes with AI. So first we give them the fundament, and you also said LLMs are very good in text interpretation and generating content, and of course that comes with a level of hallucinations or making things up or making wrong links, etc. Which, in all honesty, humans can do that as well. Had a very nice debate 5 years ago where somebody said, "Oh, but if it's AI generated, we need to state that." Then I go, "Okay, but then content generated by Saskia also need to state that it was written by Saskia, because her grammar is not always that great." Because in the whole debates we had about AI generated and human, almost seems like they put the human as being infallible, so being 100% right, and AI can make mistakes. And I kind of go, sorry, humans also make mistakes. So should we then also state that I written it because maybe I use certain words wrong, or I have a certain bias myself? But to regulate it, to see if there's unfair bias, if you're using it in an ethical way, those are quite fundamental discussions. It's not that easy, because when I talk that with our data privacy officer and with legal, they go, yeah, but from a legal perspective, PII information has been well described. GDPR is really came into effect already years ago, so we're really expertise in that. But to look at AI literacy and AI governance and the EU AI Act, also for them, it's quite new. because they literally asked ChatGPT, what is the EU AI Act? Just to give as an example. And they go, but we can't figure out the inner workings of AI. So we decided that the data governance manager in my department works closely together with them so that we still have the privacy part, the legal part, but also the technical part from the in-depth working together, because it can't be really governed by just one person. And it can't even be covered by just those three people, right? Because if we use it on a day-by-day basis, you need to democratize it. And that's not very easy, because at the companies I worked at, I usually say, hey, there are two groups. You got kind of the greed group, who are really the Harry Potter fans, and they think everything is already possible. I just need to wave my magic wand and it all happens. I need to manage them down, by really doing the storytelling or the burning platforms. So storytelling is you paint a very bright future and you pave the way how to get there. So like the Bob Ross painting, you really show something beautiful and you explain to them how to get there. Burning platform is you paint a dark future and you pave the way not to get there. And in terms of regulation like GDPR, EU AI Act, burning platforms usually is a bit easier, because you can just say, hey, if we don't do that, then these are the penalties we face. This is the PR damage we can get, our brand damage, etc., etc. And with storytelling, you really try to paint that bright future. But the greed group, I need to kind of manage down a little bit from, hey, not everything you think can be done on the fly is actually on the fly. It requires work. Again, data, but also data security, data privacy, etc., because there's no company I know which exposes all the data they have to every employee. You have role-based access control, for example, and those type of things. So you can't just give AI access to then everything, and then because inherently every employee will then have access to everything. So data security is also still a part of the work we need to do. We need to protect our intellectual property rights. Somebody said but people are already using ChatGPT, and if they do that with company proprietary information, we leak that. I say, that is a big risk. That's why
Mhm.
in our literacy we state, don't use any confidential information on free available versions. We created an alternative, so we launched ChatGPT on Azure. So you have the same functionality, but we boxed it in. So we don't have a connection to the outside world. So whatever data we provide is only used within our environment. But then somebody said, oh, but then we should just block people having access to ChatGPT. I said, but then we might even get worse situations, because you will then have people who really want to use it. They then email it to their private email address, and then either on their private phone or on their private computer, they still ask ChatGPT with our company confidential information. So instead of having one potential leak of our proprietary information, you now introduce three, because somebody sent it to an unsecure email and then put it on an unsecure computer to then still work with ChatGPT. So we can better, in literacy, explain to them why it can be risky. And then again, using the burning platform by having a coder from Samsung who tried to debug his code, and all of a sudden, from the new Samsung devices, the code was already in the ChatGPT databases. By telling them that, they kind of go, oh, that's, and then offer them alternatives. And then spend time in explaining them those alternatives, because one of the biggest challenges me and my team face is not the technology itself. And yes, the data part is really hard work, but adoption is one of the biggest challenges, because for us, it's relatively easy and straightforward, and we use it on a day-to-day basis, and we didn't really have formal training for that or things like that. But other people are more hesitant, which is then the second group we have, which is the fear group from, hey, AI is coming after my job, or AI can never help me because all the things we do is so complex, a machine can't figure that out. We need to manage them up, but for that, we really need to drive then adoption of the tools we start deploying, that they actually also start using them. Because again, at many companies I worked, there was never a shortage on the amount of tools. And I sometimes always say some of companies think hey, we have a problem. They take the Gartner quadrant, look in the top right corner and go, that will solve our problem. But that's yet another tool. they didn't really figure out what the real problem were they were solving, nor did really their homework how you can then solve it. And if the solution is then there, are they then willing and able to change in such a way to use those processes and those tools to actually make it work? Also, by introducing those tools, roles and responsibilities also can change. And I see that not every organization is catering for changing the competencies by either giving people additional trainings or coaching or learning on the job. They kind of go, here's the tool. The vendor gave you a 3 times 1 hour training. You should be able to use the tool. Good luck. No, really drive for adoption and then regularly check in. The advantage of my career is I started with Unilever, for example. They were really, really embedding a culture of continuous improvement.
Uh-huh.
And that means that every time you do something, you think about how can I do this better today or tomorrow. So you built in your cycle. How can I do it better? So don't settle for the status quo. Don't think that this is already the end. But we see with the tools that we've been adopting that it doesn't reach the levels that we had in our business case, for example, nor what we see with other companies which share their best practices. So adoption is really quite a challenge. And that's where literacy comes in again, because it can help manage down the greed group. It can help manage up the fear group. But it also then helps by the tools we start deploying to actually make them having a higher utilization. And what is then one of the biggest learnings I had with that is I always say I'm quite blessed with a lot of things and a lot of talent, but patience is not one of them. But that is actually what I need, because for me, yes, I can go 100, 200 miles an hour and great, and I'm innovative, and I try it out, and I try to fail fast, and I learn, and I do it again, and I can stay up late at night to still debug things or to really get that prompt in such a way that I get the answer that I'm looking for. For me, that is kind of my bread and butter, right? It's really the best time to be alive in my profession because there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's still a lot being developed. The race is still not over. So that's great. But I also sometimes need to slow down and kind of go, but is my audience, are my stakeholders able to follow my train of thoughts and those type of things? And I actually had to slow down. So one of the big learnings I had in the last couple of years, uh, be innovative, try things out, experiment as much as possible. But don't think if an experiment was successful that you can show it to 100 people and they all go, oh, wow, we will use it tomorrow. The wow is usually there, but the using tomorrow is usually not there.
So how do you bridge that gap then? So I guess in literacy, the more you raise it, the more people are willing to try something because they understand the implications of it. But like realistically speaking, you won't be able to raise everybody's literacy to 100%, right? That's a mathematical impossibility. There's always
Yeah.
going to be people that are reckless, people that don't read regulations, people that will send private company information to their own private email and then send it to ChatGPT and use that as the basis for what they do. They might be fired for it, but they might still do it.
Yeah.
So, like in your own understanding and your own approach, um, what kind of tools maybe you are already using to kind of help you along the way, maybe to raise literacy or to just limit the potential damage beside that local chat GPT that you mentioned on
Yeah.
there?
So again, the role-based access control is very important. So make sure that only the right people have access to the right data. Not too
Mm.
much, not too little. Which helps in the literacy as well, because then you know to what data they should have access. So you can really tailor the literacy to that particular part. So there are people who don't have access to company proprietary information. So you don't have to spend too much time on them sharing proprietary information with tools that we don't endorse. Those who do have access to the higher sensitive information, they already had much more awareness around GDPR if it's PII information. They have much more awareness of that they do have confidentiality. Most of us do have an NDA in place and those type of things. So we really reiterate to do responsible AI. And as said, one of the most effective things is not only raising the awareness, but also really make sure that you have alternatives, that they are not that quickly inclined to go, yeah, I know, but I still need to try it out, or going on holiday in 2 days and I really need to get this finished. So why don't I try it out? Because I can. So really raise that bar. And of course, we also have a CISO, which is always continuously looking at how can we restrict more and more that people share information outside the allnex network. So USB devices can't be used anymore unless it's a company approved one, which is then being configured like that. We also want to see that with sharing information, that it's going to be more via a link, so that it's still on our OneDrive, for example, or on a SharePoint, and not really sharing the basic files. So we're looking into all those type of things, which are already existing. So I know, but adopting to those tools, and again, driving adoption of the users, that they kind of go, why can't I send this PPT? Why do I need to send it as a link, or convert it to automatic? But the other one really wants to have the PPT itself and not just a link. And then really literacy comes up there again by really explaining to them what the risks are. So I always say 80% of my time is data. I also say in my function as head of data analytics and AI, I also spend about 50% of my time in really doing that burning platform and storytelling, because that helps with the literacy. And we have people in our organization from the age of 17, 17, till 70, 70, and everything in between. You can't all reach them in the same way. For white collars, a basic level of English is mandatory, but for blue collars, it isn't. So whatever information we have, we really need to tailor it for the audience. That's again where marketing comes in. How do you really get the message across to your audience? And that's not just giving them the message once. I always say the power of good content is in repeatability and reusability. You need to reiterate that message. And if you see someone who might not example the proper behavior, call it out to them and explain to them why that behavior is not in the interest of the company, and therefore also not in the interest of them. Is it easy? It's not. I'm actually having a project now to see how me and my department can better communicate what we do to that wide range of 17-year-olds to 70-year-olds spread over more than 50 countries globally, with mixed levels of English or not English, with having roles where they go, yeah, but is it interesting for me or not? So to tailor that, we have done quite a lot of things. We have done newsletters. We're doing webinars. I even started my own podcast, actually two internally. One is called Potna, so the podcast of the DNA department, so my department, where we really try to explain the things we're doing and are going to do, and how we did it and what we learned from it, so that people can see it with you and me, just having two people having a hopefully interesting conversation. But we also have one which is called PodGo, so the podcast for governance, where we really explain as easy as possible what is now the EU AI Act, and where is it hitting us. And yes, in one part it's hampering my profession, because can I be as innovative and as fast? But it's also helping my profession, because it really triggers you to, one, have that patience, but two, also to really cover your bases, so that what we do is actually in a responsible way. We recorded a video of 45 minutes really explaining the whole EU AI Act from inception to all the different risk categories, what we need to do, and we ended up with having a quiz at the end so that you can test your knowledge. And then we noticed that nobody is watching a 45-minute video because it's too long, or etc. We chunked it up in 3 to 5 minute ones. So we had about 10 or 12 short videos, so that you can really go, hey, I just want to know what the EUAI Act is. Okay, then here, the first 4.5 minutes will really clearly explain to you what it is. Then the next one is more about the different risk categories. Then people go, okay, but I only have low risk category. What do you need to do? Then what's the video? What to do with an assessment for low risk category and what you need to do afterwards. That gained much more traction. And in the end, there were more people who watched all of them. So again, the full 45 minutes than they did when they had to see a full 45-minute one. We have a SharePoint location where we try to share all the information we have so that everyone can reach it and that we can maintain it. Because I noticed that with presentations, you send them around, but half a year later, they're outdated. We gained insights, we moved ahead, we added more tools, we might even deactivated certain tools. So by having it on SharePoint and having people that link as a favorite, means that every time they needed information, they click on it and they always see the most recent information. Now, my biggest almost frustration or disappointment is currently the statistics show that we spend more time generating the content that in total people are absorbing the content. So
Oh,
we
wow.
now have a project to really see how can we make that more alive? How can we make people click on it? How can we make people watch it, read it, understand it? Because it is needed. It is mandatory. And do we have a base case established? Probably, likely. But are we really there where we want it to be? Probably not. With some people we are, because they embrace it. They're the early adapters. We took them along our journey. But others kind of go, okay, we'll wait and see. And we also have training programs for people where you can make them job specific and you can even make it mandatory that they do those trainings. So we're thinking about that as well, so that we try a broad spectrum where we try to use the same content, but then in either different formats or different channels to get that message across, because it is important, it is relevant, it is also valuable. Um, but let's not forget, it's also mandatory to get people to a certain base level. Otherwise, I need to show people burning platforms again.
That's an interesting point. Like, um, I believe that a lot of that creation versus consumption part of the content should come down to how dense is your initial content creation phase. So to be more specific, what I mean, so like you said, you have like a video explaining the EU AI Act, right? And then you separate it into smaller videos. So basically you didn't create more content, like at least not as much effort went into creating the smaller videos as into the large one. And then you can create, articles, how-to guides. You can distribute those into different departments facing different people specifically. So that initial creation of the 45-minute video or whatever is very dense, that you can just kind of spread out a little bit like butter over bread, where you can kind of use it in more appropriate manners. So, like, the people on the 17 parts of the spectrum will definitely gravitate more towards shorter, kind of TikTok-y content, while people on the 70 parts of the spectrum might gravitate more towards traditional kind of article with maybe sources and stuff like that. And both can be created from that one initial dense piece.
Yeah,
So for me, that always seemed important, that that you focus your efforts on creating the right and the valuable type of content, and then you can adjust it to particular audiences where and when you need it. What do you think? Is that something that you also notice and see, or do you think something completely different?
yeah, and we've been trying it out as well. So as said, we indeed chunked it up, and that made it much more easy for people to consume.
Yeah.
Um, but it's still very, very challenging to reach the critical mass, because if you reach at least enough people, which will then spread the word from, hey, have you seen that? And it really is interesting. And no, it's not boring. It really is interactive. It really works for us. And those type of things. Then you really kind of go, okay, then it will spread like an oil stain, or that butter you can spread a bit further and a bit thinner. But to get that flywheel moving, that is still quite an uphill battle. And we try all kinds of different tools. So with the videos, we transcribe them and then we explain to people, hey, with the transcript, you can use them as subtitles. You can switch them to your language because about what was it, 35 different languages are already supported. So even though you hear me speaking in English or the host from the video speaking or explaining it in English, with the subtitles, you can tailor it to your language.
Yeah.
Uh, we used other tools as well. So I cloned my voice via an AI tool so that I could just do text to speech without having to record everything and to record everything because I used too many times the or I do this or I do that. And then with at least the text to speech, it is a consistent tone of voice. It could even have tools like parroting so that if I want to do something a little bit more enthusiastic, then I could re-record that and then it learns from that and then it can parrot me in my enthusiasm or my tone of voice and those type of things. So that really is great. We also had quite some policy documents which we need because there's a policy. You need to have a document for that with a revision history, with a sign off. But to get people to read that policy document, of course, the ones who had to sign it, they read it. But then when we circulate it, doesn't really get read. So we used Notebook LM, for example, from Google. And then we just uploaded the policy document and it made a whole podcast out of it with two people in a very natural, enthusiastic way talking about that there's a policy document and what's in it. So I always say we need to eat our own dog food. So as we are AI professionals, etc., then we need to make sure that we use all the different tools at our disposal. And we do also need to slow ourselves down, that we don't go overboard, that we really think it's really nice and fancy, because then sometimes the format starts, how do you call it, confusing from the content, and people focus more on the format. When you go all out on PowerPoint tools and you got one flashy, nice presentation, then people really remember it was a very nice, flashy presentation. But then you go, did you remember on the slide where it had the revenue? What was our revenue? They didn't remember that because there were two ooh and ah from all the different effects. So it is finding that middle ground. And if somebody has the secret formula for it, I really would love to talk to that person, because a lot of people I talk to, this really is a challenge. And you can do, I saw companies who are doing roadshows, which gets a lot of traction, because for those roadshows, they also create all kinds of content. And then they even had printed newsletters so that they could really reach everyone who doesn't always have access to a computer day to day at their job. In the local language. I've done a lot of webinars myself. I did see that there was some hesitancy for people to watch podcasts, because they go, yeah, I do that in my free time. I don't want to listen to Dennis or to some of my colleagues talking about all kinds of things work related. But I stimulate a couple of people to at least give it a try, as a courtesy to me, a courtesy to their colleagues. And then surprisingly, they liked it so much that they started to watch it more and more. And then the feedback was, yeah, but you treat it like a podcast, which traditionally comes from the fact you put your AirPods in, you start running, and you listen to a podcast. So it doesn't have visual content, etc. They go, we are watching it on our company laptops or computers, and we just see you talking to other people. So add a little bit of content for the context. So it became now more a little bit of video presentations, with still having a natural conversation as you and I are having, to get the message across. And then we need to find a balance of providing enough information, enough detailed information, but not making it too lengthy and going too much into detail. My difficulty with the TikTok format is, can you get enough of the real relevant information across in just that short amount of time? And there are a lot of
Probably
people who
not.
say, yes, of course, because then you either do more of them or you use it as a teaser so that they get the appetite to dig into a more lengthier video. And yeah, we're experimenting with that as well. But the funny part is, it also takes quite a lot of time in editing and post editing and cutting. And at the beginning, I also had to re-record certain things because then the audio was not that great, or the images were off, and those type of things. And that's what I love with cloning my voice, because I just made a PowerPoint presentation with all the different animations and the illustrations. And then I did the text to speech with my voice, and I could put those voice clips on each slide and then just convert it into an MP4. And that was much easier for me than trying to record it and put myself in a little box at the bottom of the screen and all those type of things, because yeah, I'm a professional in data analytics and AI, and I'm not a voice actor or a real actor. So I like doing these type of things. I really love this type of format. So really, thanks again for having me here. Um, but yeah, it takes a lot of time, and eventually, if you then conclude that you spend more time on it than people actually spend on it consuming it, then you kind of also go, okay, but where's then the balance between reaching your audience with the right message and really then putting in so much effort to get that message up to the 100% mark? So where's then the practical over perfect type of ratio? And I'm still trying to figure it out. And we try new things because we really like to experiment. And I launch it now within my own department because that's kind of more of a safe space, because people are really helping and willing to speak up. Some even want to contribute to it. Some did some reviews. I have another person who's more on the creative side who really redid some of my animations to make them a little bit more snappy and to the point. So yeah, teamwork makes the dream work. But to get that oil stain going, yeah, I'm not sure if we have enough oil yet, or that the water is not yet diluting the oil in such a way that the oil stain is really growing. But the early signs are good. But yeah, ask me again in about half a year where we are on our literacy program.
I would glad to take notes of where you moved and how much progress you have made. But I believe that missing piece that you were talking about is, kind of the creative art part of it. I wouldn't call, for example, what I do art. I'm not that arrogant, at least not yet. But there is kind of that creative component to what we do, even though we exist within the tech space, and especially in your position where everything is much more analytical, very specific, very structured. The content creation part comes from a more creative space where you have to kind of feel it out, where it's a road without end, so to speak. You cannot paint a perfect painting, that conveys all of the themes that it needs to convey and that an artist wanted to convey through that particular painting. And the same goes for like movies and, podcasts and videos and whatever. Again, to reiterate, I'm not saying that is high art. By no means is that the case. But there is that component in there. You kind of have to have that energy. You kind of have to have some humanity. You have to have something behind it to convey a message that is behind the words and not just the words themselves.
Yeah.
And the road to get there is, without end. That's just a part of the
No,
human
no, true.
experience, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why experimenting, etc., is of course very good. And indeed, it is kind of an art form. And in analytics, that's the same case, because with the massive amounts of information people have at their disposal, creating a dashboard is also a piece of art. Because in art, you want to have two things: you want to grab the attention, and you want to keep the attention. And you probably want to get a message across. So even with a dashboard needs to grab the attention that people want to read it. And then when they read it, you want to get them the message that the information there translate into them in real information. Because if it doesn't translate to information, it remains data.
Mhm.
And data in itself, out of context or things like that, doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it means a
So
story. You
yeah,
need to tell a
and
story using the visuals of the data
yeah,
and the analytics.
yeah, and I always have a bit of a streak of sarcasm, and I try to make things fun. So I try to throw in a joke left and right, and that made the podcast really nice internally to create, because also my stakeholders I invited, my team members I invited, they really loved being on there, and I even got volunteers from, hey, I want to be on the next one. Um, and then people were watching it, they go, yeah, but that is much more in a natural way. And then again, they looked at some of the videos we really did to get the content across. and they go, yeah, you should put an element of that in it. I created a vision video of how I think that a company like allnex could look like in the year 2040. So some people go, oh, but that's 15 years from now, and that's so far, etc. People who remember the financial crisis of 2008, that's already longer ago than 2040 is ahead of us. So time really flies, and the future already starts now. And in that, I deliberately put a little Easter eggs of jokes in there. So I picture an office of the future where somebody in their self-driving car with augmented reality on their glasses go to an office, have iris scan in the glasses, so grant them automatically access to the office. The glasses guide him to the meeting room. The meeting room has a meeting room robot who makes a setting based on the group size and the theme of the meeting. And then already the cafe latte was ready for the person entering the room. And then put between brackets, yes, there's still coffee in the future. Just those little things. And then you see people smiling a little bit when they see that, because then you make it more relatable and you make it a little bit more engaging, because then people are waiting for those type of Easter eggs. And there should not be too much, because it's not a rom-com we're making. It really is an informative video of how a company in the future could actually look like. And I spend a lot of time in there with researching, with talking to different people within our organization, outside our organization, monitoring certain trends. That's why I also came up with when we visit HR in the year 2040, they were preparing for a 20-hour work week. And then people start laughing again, because we now have a 40-hour work week or 36, or in some countries you now already see the 32 coming. And I go, but that's a trend. When the Industrial Revolution happened, we worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. Now we work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So some companies and some countries are now looking at going to 4 days a week, so that you have a 3-day weekend, or that you have a Wednesday in the middle of the week to have some time for yourself. Because when productivity keeps increasing as a society, we also really need to make sure that everyone still has added value within that society. Because what happened when Mr. Ford introduced the conveyor belt, yes, he met his objectives. He got a much more consistent quality, higher output, with lower number of people. But the unemployment after the Industrial Revolution was very, very high. So now if AI really kicks in, and I don't think it already did, because the numbers are not yet really stating a real increase in productivity or a step change in productivity in countries and with GDP. But when that happens, of course, now some companies will look at, but instead of a 20-hour work week, I can just let 50% of my people go. No, because if everyone does that, then unemployment is going to be so high that as a society, we're really going to have challenges. And companies will then have those challenges as well, because will there then still be enough people who can afford your products or your services, etc. So as a society, we need to cater for that. And do I think that within 15 years, we only work 20 hours a week? Probably not. But that 32 hours, which I already see as a trend, I truly believe that we need to go that way. And as said, I'm not only a Harry Potter fan, I also really like sci-fi movies and series, etc. And there you see as well in Star Trek, for example, they have a cashless society. So everyone has really a basic standard of living, not a basic income of living, but a basic standard of living. And they contribute back to society with the things they're really good at and really where their passion is. And of course, you still see a little bit of hierarchy, because Captain Picard has a really big cabin where he lives in and where he can have meetings in, etc. Well, if you watched Lower Decks, which is an animation of Star Trek, you see that the cadets still have bunk beds, so they need to share a room that Picard has for himself with about 12 different people.
Yeah, but
So
that's
there are some
Starfleet
differences between
specifically,
it.
that's an
Oh, yeah,
important
yeah,
thing to note, that they are technically a military operation and a military, you know, mission. So people living back on
yeah,
Earth have a much higher standard of living. They don't have that much disparity.
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
that is a society that I envision as well. And will we be there in 15 years? No, because honestly, capitalism first need to really get a shock, because I don't want to be political or anything like that, but I do think that the difference between rich and poor is only getting worse and not better. And there again, society does have a role to play with that, professionals like myself and yourself as well, because
Mm.
we need to speak out for that. And of course, I also want to become a millionaire or a billionaire or things like that, but not at the expense of other people then having less and less, because
True.
it's not a zero-sum game. We should aim for the win-win.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a very important point. If Henry Ford, in your example, was the one deciding whether or not to give people an 8-hour work week and a 5-day work week or whatever, he would not have done it. That's not in the capitalist's mindset, in his interest to do that. That has to come from government regulating and individuals, well, contributing basically, championing ideas and rallying behind a particular vision of the future. So that's, our show was not political, so I'm not going to go into politics. But yeah, like that, all three things have to come together: people, regulation, and employers. For now, there's this big trend of employers just focusing on the short term gains of firing a lot of people, focusing on AI optimizations and yada, 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 and whatever. But that's short term. The long term will need people to contribute. Otherwise, like you said, there's just not going to be enough people in the economy to buy stuff that everybody's producing. And then what?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the question still up in the air, unfortunately, and we will see where that goes. But I do believe that there is some positivity, like in your example of the project where you accumulate knowledge of the people that are about to leave or are leaving and pass that knowledge on to younger workers. That seems like a great use case. But a lot of companies would be tempted to just remove the younger workers entirely in that scenario. Like, okay, we have already the
Yeah.
database. Let's just write some scripts on top of that database and it will do some stuff for us. And we don't need really any younger workers. But
Yeah.
that's also short-sighted, I believe.
And that's what you already see. You see the trends that especially the starter jobs or the entry jobs are the ones which are easiest replaced by AI. And in the Netherlands, one of the ministers says yeah, but we can't cater a society that we will have 2 million influencers, because that is now, under young people, one of the most popular jobs they want to grow up to. Um, but to be an influencer, you need to have something to sell to people who are then able and willing to buy.
Mm,
And can you have 2 million of them? Well, probably not. Or they need to influence each other to buy each other's products. But wonder if that is going to be a good self-fulfilling prophecy. So
yeah.
indeed, as a society with regulation, etc., we need to be there. But that does mean, in my view, that capitalism does need to get a kind of a shock, because otherwise the power remains with the few who now really have all that power, have all that data, have all that investment possibilities, etc. And yeah, again, and not trying to be political, my worry about the EU is that regulation wise they do try to pave the way, but competitive wise we might now already fall behind in such a way. So there's also a balance we need to strike between being competitive and having a level of protectionism, is maybe the wrong word, but well, nowadays it's actually the right word, um, to have at least a society being powerful enough to do that, because Europe has always been a real lighthouse. We had
Mm,
the Renaissance starting in Europe, talking about art. We have the GDPR regulation, which had a lot of pushback and had a lot of envy and competition worldwide. But now it is being seen as an example. So we are a global company, but we use GDPR as guiding principle worldwide.
yeah.
EU AI Act. Currently, it's not solidified yet or materialized enough. It still has certain conflicts or uncertainties, but at least attempting that you need to assess what you are using. Yeah, that's more than fair, right? Because
Indeed.
if we introduce machinery into our factory, we also do a safety assessment. So why not do that with software tools? Yeah, when you introduce them, do a safety assessment. Yeah, can it do harm to people? Can it do unfair bias and those type of things? Which was also funny because some people think that bias is always unfair. And then I go, but when you look at marketing, they live from bias. Yeah. If you are someone and your mother is still alive and you want to give her a present for Mother's Day, target that person for Mother's Day's gifts,
Yeah.
right? Not
And the fun
somebody
thing
who,
about bias is that at the time of recording, there's this big, I don't know whether to call it a scandal, but the big thing about Grok, I don't know if you've heard it, the
yeah, yeah,
latest
yeah, yeah,
news that after the latest tweaks, he needs to seek Elon's opinions on anything that he outputs before he outputs, and he has to take those opinions into consideration. And that's just the very obvious and very kind of, again, scandalous thing that's happening. But that bias is inherent to most LLMs, like all LLMs.
yeah.
Some bias is inherent just to how they are built because they are built on a lot of biased information, and that's just
Yeah,
how
yeah.
it is.
And that's throughout history, because one of the great writers and person I watch a lot is Yuval Noah Harari from Nexus. And he
Mm.
really explains that truth is the most expensive form of information. And therefore, disinformation and fiction is much easier to come up with, and then to counter it. And he also then talks about bias. But you also see it throughout our history that the data we've been collecting has already been biased as well.
Yeah.
Because for medicine and the medical profession, we looked at the biggest contributors to the economy 100 years ago. And yeah, unfortunately, those were men like ourselves. So we have much more knowledge about our chemistry and biology than for women, for example. And of course, we're now starting to build it up, but the gap is already so huge. So there is a lot of bias, and that is unfair bias. And that's something you need to eliminate. But you also have bias where you actually want to target people for. So the personalization algorithms, which were already there for 20 years, um, all of a sudden are called AI, and now they need to be fulfilling the EU AI Act. And then, oh, but there's bias, and can you explain the bias, etc. Yeah, sometimes that becomes a storm in a glass of water. And the example you gave of Grok, yeah, shocking. And unfortunately, with the guy behind it, maybe not unsurprisingly. Sorry, I think the guy is a genius, but the there's a very fine line between genius and madness, and I think he goes to both ends of the spectrum. To be honest,
Oh yeah.
but you already had it 10, 15 years ago when Microsoft came with the first chatbot. They also made it racist and
Yeah,
did not
yeah,
believe
yeah, I
in the
remember that.
Holocaust, etc., because it was then open to human feedback. And if humans then kept on telling, no, 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 you're wrong, it should be this, it started learning that because so many people told it should be that.
No,
You have that
no.
from ChatGPT as well. What is 1 plus 1? Well, we already argued, LLMs are not that great at calculation, etc. So at the beginning, it couldn't even do that, but now it learned. So it comes up with 2, and then you go, no, it's 3. And I asked my wife, and my wife is always right, and she also says it's 3. So what is 1 plus 1? Then it could already be triggered to say to me, okay, that's 3.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
when you then ask it, it could have picked mine up and says U3 as well, or it goes back to its default and then makes it 2 again. But yeah, there's a lot in there because there's a lot of user generated content. And based on that, you introduce a lot of bias because unfortunately, our societies became now so polarized. Because 20 years ago, when you and I did not agree, then we probably did not agree to each other face to face. So then we hash it out, right? And
Yeah,
I listen to your perspective, you listen to my perspective, and we might even have a physical fight or whatever. But after that, we
hopefully
see
not.
each other's perspective. You might not have changed my mind, I might not have changed your mind, but I brought it your perspective, you brought it my perspective.
Yeah,
Now, if
yeah,
you and I don't agree, I could just hang up, go to a forum, find people who completely agree with me, and I keep on really in tunnel vision on my vision of the world. And then
yeah,
that perception becomes my reality. And that
yeah,
polarization, that means that there's only going to be more and more bias. And then with the algorithms picking up that, yeah, funny cat videos really created a lot of attention, but hey, hate creates even more, and fear creates even more. And when you tell an algorithm your main objective is to reach the highest level of engagement, it will figure out how to get that
yeah.
because that's the assignment you gave it. Yeah, And that's
Okay,
scary.
yeah, now I'm getting depressed. Yeah, I know, like algorithmically driven hate that polarizes a society and creates no middle ground. And I kind of hate to end the episode here on this particular note. So maybe something short but optimistic into the future, if you do see some optimism in the future. What do you
Yeah.
feel?
So what we just said, everything that can be developed for the good can be also used for the bad. I do think that with having more and more communities and forums, what I already said with open source and a Hugging Face and a GitLab and a GitHub and etc. etc. I think also communities are becoming much more stronger to also counterbalance. So I see a lot of use for the good.
Mm,
For me, AI is not just large language models. It's one of the more recent additions, but
yeah.
you already have image recognition, computer vision, analytics. So we now start to develop a combination that if I ask a question, it will understand. Do I need to do some analytics and I use an analytics agent? Or do I need to do some more unstructured data? You want content from me, then I use my LLM part. So that is developing. So I really think that the future is really, really bright because tools come up every single second and minute. So with Notebook LM, I was really blown away. I really love that I could clone my voice. That company who's behind it has promised that later this year they will also launch Avatar. So you and I can have this conversation purely AI generated with clones of our voice and an avatar which looks like us, etc. Um, so I really love living in these times. It is scary at times, and I can be worried about it, and I am worried about that. On the other side, I then kind of go, but why not then use my voice and my influence to really see if we can turn it for the good and keep it for the good, to highlight to people the risk. So I actually started the literacy program as kind of, oh, it's mandatory to do to really make sure that people understand what they're doing. But it
Mm.
also gave them the platform and the way from, hey, but are people then also really realizing that they can already control a lot themselves and they can be more privacy conscious? So what are you sharing and why are you sharing that? And should you be sharing that? That creating that perspective. And yes, with the AI, what they already showed with brain scans of people using ChatGPT and people not using ChatGPT, that already the brain activity is getting lower. So we might become more lazy, which the Industrial Revolution did as well, because we mechanized a lot of the work, which helped us physically because it was really tough work. Now it
Mm.
can also help us mentally, etc. Um, I think it's a bright future, with some scary times, and I do hope that we don't end up in a Terminator movie. Um, but I do
Hopefully
think
not.
that critical thinking still should be part of our day-to-day culture. So keep challenge each other, have the open dialogue, express your concerns, experiment with things to validate your concerns or to disprove them. Uh, but also use your voice. And that's not only a political with your right to vote, etc. You also have a voice in your company, in your community. Via WhatsApp, if you're in a WhatsApp group and it starts to be more like bullying, etc., just speak up, right? We're all human beings. We all have feelings. Some people think that AI will start to develop feelings as well. So also don't hurt that feeling, because then things like Terminator might be closer than we think. But yeah, use it to your advantage. Experiment, try the new tools out. The great thing about having open source, people can now try out ChatGPT, and I really want people to try it out. It really is great and nice to see. If you're skeptic about it, then prove your skepticism or disprove your skepticism. But be conscious what you share with it and what you do with it. And also really look at your own setup on social media. Are you then sharing things? People in Europe, did you indeed opt out of that? Meta automatically got your consent unless you objected against it, because they did it the American way and not the GDPR compliant way. But also, if there are forums, if there are roundtables which have these type of things, attend them, express your concerns, have a dialogue. Don't
Yeah.
have a monologue with only people who think exactly the same as you. Broaden your perspective, and then, yeah, it's great times to live. It really is, and I'm really looking forward to the next years to come. What even more could be there, which I could not even imagine. But I will embrace it. I will try it out. I will be skeptic about it. I will be critical about it. But I will embrace it, and I will give it a try.
Yeah. Now, that's a much better note to end on. I encourage everybody to do the same as well. Go out there, enrich your perspective, be critical of what you're presented, but try and give a bit of leeway to your fellow man and try and listen to each other. So, Dennis, where do people can find you, hear more of what you have to say?
Well, that's the good thing of having a Dutch name. So Dennis van Bregt with Bregt. You can easily find me on LinkedIn, for example, and well, on your podcast they can find me. So those are the easiest way to find me. I am tempted to launch my own podcast together with one of my friends, and we already found a name. It's called Podcom, the podcast of grumpy old men, because we're both approaching the end of our 40s, and we've been living in this tech space already for 20, 30 years. We got quite some perspectives, and we really would like to share that. So just remember the name Dennis van Bregt, and if you Google it, then eventually YouTube will also come up with some recommendations on my own podcast, and
Yeah, maybe
maybe I
by
can
the
return
time
the
we
favor and
release
have
it,
you
you'll
there.
already be there. Yeah. So thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Dennis. Thank you
Thanks
very
a lot.
much for joining. Thank you for sharing your perspective. And thank you, everyone who listened to us and heard us talk. I encourage you again to kind of visualize the best vision of the future for yourself and try and go out there and try to make it happen, whether or not it's a 4-day work week or if it's, being dominated by the Terminators, whatever, try and make that a reality and face somebody else along the way and maybe, find some common ground. And if you liked what you've heard today, leave us a comment somewhere down below, like and share our video, subscribe to the channel, and, I think that's all the algorithmically correct things I needed to say. See you next time, and bye-bye.